Welcome to this month's installment of the Intentional Success webinar. I'm your presenter, Tom Stimson, and we're going to talk about today how to create a measurable conversion metric for your sales pipeline. The whole point here is that if we want to get results, we need to be measuring the right things, and too often we're not measuring the right things, which is, I'll get to that in just a minute. If you're new, I'm Tom Stimson. I work with owners and management teams, specifically and ostensibly in the live events industry, all through the vertical. So if you're a production rental company, you're a content creating company, you're a production management company, if you're a supplier in that chain, if you're a manufacturer, I have expertise specific to our industry. I'm happy to chat with you about what I can do for you. You can learn more at my website. If you're new to these webinars, welcome. Thank you. It's always great to have new folks here. The session is being recorded. I always double check myself for that, right? Yep, I did hit record. Good for me. It will be posted later on today on my website. It'll be up for a month. If you want to see older webinars, I'll talk about how to find them later on in today's webinar. We use the Q&A box for questions, but feel free to use the chat to say hello to each other. Meet a new friend, find a new supplier, say hello to an old friend. That's what it's there for. But I will be responding to questions in the Q&A. Post a question anytime you want in the Q&A, and I will answer them in as timely a way as I can. All right, without any more preamble here, let's get started on this. As I often do, I'm going to start with a story about all of this. And I've told this story before. This is not a terribly new story, but it's very relevant to today's webinar. There was a business development person who I worked with many, many years ago, and a couple of different of my clients employed this person. And why does more than one client have them? Let me tell you why, because that's what's important. He was probably the most successful business development person I have ever met. And he was fired from 3 companies before somebody figured out what he was doing was exactly what they needed. So he sought, and here was his tragic flaw. He sought exactly the customers he was told to seek. And he would get out there and meet with them in person. He would qualify them, and he would advance the prospect to the next step. If he was told to get an RFP, he would bring in an RFP. If he was told to get a meeting, he'd get a meeting. And he had an uncanny ability to find exactly who he was told to find, even down to an individual name. But more importantly, if you said, hey, I want an event planner for a Fortune 500 company, boom. He knew where to find him. He would get in there and he would get that meeting. If you told him to work in a region, he could do it in a region. He brought more people to the table that were exactly what was asked for. And then the relationships would die because he was business development. And in every one of these cases where he was deemed unsuccessful, he was being measured on closed sales. The problem was he wasn't the person who was going to close the sale. They had this great business development person. He was bringing somebody into the funnel who didn't, and then the funnel ended. They didn't have a good system for processing, and they were losing these great leads and prospects and opportunities. He was not a salesperson. So he was being measured on the wrong thing. So after 6 or 9 or 12 months, well, you haven't generated any sales, we need to let you go, which I would agree with if that had actually been his job. So I use this because while it sounds a little bit extreme and it sounds a little bit silly, it's incredibly common. And we see this sort of thing all the time, not just in business development, but also in sales roles. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do to measure the right things so that we can get the results that we want, which sometimes means changing how we're doing things. Because measuring, if these companies had been measuring what happens after the prospect got into the organization, into the sales funnel, instead of measuring something that never happened, which was the final sale, if they had started measuring that, they would have understood where their processes were breaking down. So unfortunately, I wasn't always able to save him, but he did move on to some other folks, and he's doing well now. And I can't tell you who he is because that's the way our industry works, right? So why am I doing this webinar? Look, if we only measure wins, then every proposal opportunity becomes winnable because it becomes a binary thing. Success means we win this proposal. Failure means that we don't. And if all we're focused on is the wins and we get something to the proposal stage, whether it's a good job for us to do or not, or whether it's a good fit client or not, the fact is your measurement system says that you're going to try and win this job because that's what defines success. And when you do that, it'll drive your, first, it's going to drive your prices down. Second, it's going to allow scope creep to kick in. It's going to take your focus away from better opportunities, that it's going to use up your capacity that could have been saved for better clients. You quickly end up chasing requests for proposal instead of chasing ideal customers or ideal clients. Ultimately, you will chase money instead of current money, instead of future business. I need money now because your cash flow is going to suffer in this model. And then the job becomes more important than who the customer is. So if we measure wins, we see $1 million job, we have to win it because that's a huge win. Even if it's for something that's not winnable, it's not for a good customer. Sometimes it's not even work that you do, but it's hard to turn away for the money. Coming out of the pandemic, changes in the buying cycle, changes in customer behavior, changes in lead time are creating openings for some of these old bad habits to come back into play. More importantly, you have a lot of good clients now who are buying from you at better margins for better reasons. They're a better fit, but those old clients are coming back and asking you to, fit them in, do this work, and they're dangling fancy RFPs out in front of you. And the lure to get you back into that world is strong because they need you. These are price shoppers, right? These are people who want to commoditize the value chain, which you're a major part of. They want to pull you back into that, what I call the dark side of the business. If we're measuring the wrong thing, it's much easier for us to get pulled back into that dark side. If we want to stay firmly in the sweet spot of the business with better customers, better projects, higher margins, less stress, less crisis, less overbooking, all those things that make life easier to bear and the business industry more fun to be in, we got to measure some different stuff. So first thing we need to do is set aside some pre-pandemic tactics, right? Some mindsets that I'm still finding out there. The typical one is our best, how do we find new business? Well, our best client sent us an RFP after finding us on the internet. That's why we have the, send us your RFP link on our website, submit an RFP. Okay, this is the kind of thinking that we need to curb because anecdotes, okay, are not data, okay? They're subjective opinions about data. There are stories that connect to data, but the data often proves that our anecdotes are not really valid or not really useful in the way that we're trying to use them. So we're going to focus a lot on what we should be doing instead, right? Now, of course, I'm going to mention marketing. Marketing is important in all this because marketing and sales go together. We have to have good marketing to have better sales, right? The purpose of marketing, the goal of marketing is to generate qualified leads and referrals. Yes, it affects your branding. It, sends out messaging. There's a lot of things that marketing does, but all of that is for the purpose to generate qualified leads and referrals and make it as frictionless as possible for those leads and referrals to get into your system and get the attention that they want. Okay? Business development or the sales role will develop these qualified opportunities, or they're pre-qualified. Perhaps they need more qualification, that's fine. But that's the first step in the business development or sales role, is to move the qualification process along. Eventually, when we're processing an opportunity, sales' job is to convert the opportunity. And that opportunity is going to be converted into profitable revenue, which operations then takes and converts into gross profit. So I want you to be clear about what I'm talking about here. I may use terms differently than other people have used them with you. Here's how I'm going to use those turns. So what we're looking for is the path to the most consistent results, assuming that the results that you want. So I'm all about goal setting. If we set a goal of who your ideal customer is or what you want to do for them and the margins you expect to make, there's not a lot of argument that says we should be looking at other stuff. Maybe there's some secondary work that you need to do and we can provide for that. But today I just really want to focus on what your core business is, which should be 70, 80% of what you do. Now, to start getting our head straight on all of this, we need to talk about the differences between inputs and outputs, okay? A close rate is a ratio of an input to an output, right? So 100 confirmed orders from 200 proposals is a 50% close rate based on orders written, okay? $500,000 in revenue from confirmed orders against $2 million in proposals is a 25% close rate. So when you talk about something, make sure you know what it's actually referencing, because those are both valid close rates. Which one is more useful for you? Okay. Now, I find in general that we are more focused on one output. If I ask people what their close rate is, they rarely think of the dollar amount. They think of the number of proposals that they write and the number of confirmed orders. So yes, we have an 80% close rate on our confirmed orders, but the jobs we really want are the ones we're not confirming. We've got a lot of garbage orders that we're confirming. So, or orders that don't meet the criteria that are just they're otherwise just filling in the gaps. So lesson number one, find the useful metric, not the most satisfying one, right? So while we're on the subject of close rates, not to go down a rabbit hole, how do you improve your close rate, right? It's very simple. You either get better at writing proposals that will help close themselves, which means you listen to the customer better, you repeat back to what they need better. Done entire webinars on this, as you all know. Reduce unqualified proposals, which is a filtering process, which was also a marketing process. So we want to attract fewer of the wrong kinds of leads so that we have less to filter out. We want to qualify better folks. And if we increase the number of qualified proposals, we will also improve our close rate. So if I'm writing a proposal for a qualified buyer, I'm much more likely to close than an unqualified buyer, right? Knowing this, what we want to focus on today is how do we improve the steps that lead to qualified proposals? Making measurements there is a better indicator of success. If I can improve my numbers that lead to qualified proposals, my proposal rate will also improve. But I can, at the grassroots level, I can make changes in my approach and delivery that are going to improve my overall business. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to understand entry points. You have customers that come from a lot of different directions. You have customers that come in referrals. You have old customers who hunt you down and find you again. You have people who just randomly find you on the internet. There are people that you go out and introduce yourself and proactively reach out to. All of these are entry points. The question I want you to think about, as I continue with the webinar, but certainly after this webinar, is who are your best customers? Where did they come from? What was the entry point? Okay. So how did they find you? What happened next? Because what you're going to find is that your best customers have something in common, which is your ideal conversion point. And we'll talk more about conversion points in a minute. When you met this new best customer, whenever it was, it could have been weeks ago, it could have been years ago, how did they find you? What was that first encounter like after they found you? And then when in the process did you know that this was going to be a good relationship and this was going to work out? If we can reproduce those points of progression, we're going to probably have a winning formula for getting more of the same kind of clients. And if we want this to happen, then we're going to have to measure it to make sure that we're doing the things that are getting the results that we're looking for. So I'm going to move the measurement point. Close rate is far too down the road in the process to help us make corrections in what we're trying to do. So think about your entry points. You get referrals. A referral gets sent to your website, or they get sent to your social media, or they find you accidentally. Referrals might contact a specific representative. They say, oh yeah, call Tom at so-and-so, he'll take care of you. You can have an organic lead that discovers your website or social. You can have an organic lead that observes your activity. They're doing a site survey at a convention center and they see your team working. That's an organic lead. A targeted lead is somebody that you specifically sought out and your representative makes contact with. And then you have untargeted leads, which often happen through casual contact, like networking. You're at an MPI event, or you're at a convention or the exhibitor show, and all of a sudden you meet somebody who turns into a prospect. So all of these are great entry points. Where are you finding your best customers? You may find people in all of these, but where are the best ones coming from? Now, what happens next, right? So that lead from that previous slide has to go through something to become an opportunity. What do they do? Do they magically send you an RFP out of the blue? Do they ask you for a proposal and tell you about the project and develop the opportunity? Do they simply place an order? I mean, what really happens next? Or was there a step right before that? Aha, and that's what I'm looking for. What's the step that happened between a lead and an opportunity that made a difference so that this became your best customer, that you guys figured out that you were made to work together, okay? What does that look like? Now, we've talked about this in recent webinars, of course, these extra steps that you can take in the selling process to develop that prospect, to make that opportunity more viable and better qualified. We do capabilities presentations, things like that. But sometimes this lead simply asked you about how do you solve a problem. They didn't have a piece of work to offer you. They simply said, hey, you seemed very knowledgeable. Can you tell me how you would do this? Or how could we deal with this? How should we handle this? And that engagement help them believe that you could be a good partner for them. Sometimes it's like, hey, we have a supplier, they're dropping the ball. Can you guys help us? And you help them. Maybe that's it. Maybe responding to an urgent need is your superpower. How can we get out there and sabotage shows? No, I didn't say that. Maybe they visited your office. Many of you tell me that your best customers are the pivot points when a potential customer became somebody who really wanted to do business with you was when they visited your office and they found out that, oh my goodness, you guys are really legit. Look at these great people. This is a company I can do business with. Maybe they met your team on that visit, or maybe they met your team at an event they were involved with. Maybe you invited them to a social event, okay? And they met you at a social event. There's a lot of things there where people start to realize that maybe I am talking to the right folks, okay? How can we recreate these, okay, which is a marketing and sales and marketing challenge, but more importantly, how can we measure them? So marketing is leading the prospect to the conversion point, okay? Sales is leading the opportunity post-conversion to confirmation. That conversion point that we're talking about, whatever it might be for your organization or for your target customer, is a collaboration between marketing and sales, or business development and sales. Okay, how can we put those powers together and measure them? So if we understand this, how can I start putting this to work? And then I can figure out, how do I know if it's actually working, which is the measurement, which is what we're going to spend the rest of the webinar talking about. So to put this idea to work, number one, empower salespeople to initiate conversion moments, because very often conversion moments happen. They're kind of laid at our feet and we need to recognize them. For instance, my favorite story, and this happens all the time, this has happened to all of you. You know, a prospect has found you, they've vetted you themselves. They say, hey, we think you're the company we'd like to work with. We've got the outline of a proposal for an RFP. You know, it's a couple $100,000. Would you guys, take a look at putting together a proposal? Well, who wouldn't just immediately say, yes, we'll absolutely do that, and turn around and develop the proposal, which is exactly the wrong thing to do, because what is your close rate when you skipped all the steps that happened beforehand? Versus what is your close rate when you ask that client, so man, we'd love to work with you, but let's get to know each other better. Can I fly you in, spend a day at our office, meet the team, talk about your project so that I can put together the right proposal for you? Oh, well, my company won't pay for travel, so don't worry, we'll pay for all that travel. How many of you do that? So that's what I'm talking about when in terms of empowering salespeople, is to give them the opportunity to spot chances like that so that they can get that prospect across your threshold if that is your conversion point. Or they can say, hey, we need to do a site survey with this. We'd love you to join us there. And while we're there, I would like to I'm going to bring some equipment. I'm going to show you a couple of things and how they work in that space, to see if we can't come up with a better solution than the one that you're asking for. So in other words, make that site survey a conversion moment rather than just showing up there with some measuring devices and an iPad and writing a bunch of stuff down. Another thing you can do is teach the team how to formalize the qualification to include a conversion event. For instance, we would love to put a proposal together for you. However, our best customers will take this step first. So we're going to invite you to take this step. We'd like to give you a capabilities pitch, or we'd like to demonstrate a bit of technology or a platform that's going to be integral into the project. All of these things are measurable things that we can measurable things that will tell us what is working. So I know many of you are thinking right now, I don't have time for this. This is a lot of extra steps. My people can't do all of this. This is not completely true, but I understand your reaction. But if we can start to measure some of this, you will find that this is actually where your best customers come from. So if I started measuring these things, how am I going to know that something is actually working, which is the whole point of metrics, right? So what are the conversion metrics that we can look at? Think about sequencing. So everything I've described here has been a series of steps. Somebody found your website, they reached out and talked to someone. We encourage them to take a meeting with us. We want to unpack their job a little bit. We want them to meet the team. We want them to get them to our office, do a site survey. There's a sequence to everything that we do. There's a lot of sequences that you don't actually see because the customer or the buyer is doing it on their own. If they go to your website, find a blog post they like or a tool that they get to download, are they getting an email follow-up? Are there automatic things happening to help keep them in that same process? Are we asking them, to set up an introduction call? Or are we inviting them to have a conversation? Okay. Or are we asking them to refer us to somebody else in their organization if they're not the right person? So putting in sequences that we can measure gives us an idea of where we're losing people along the way, where we need to put in extra effort. But it's also giving those prospects the opportunity to get what they need, which may not have been readily available. In other words, we're reducing the friction to them doing business the way they want to do. And we want to measure each of these points. If we meet somebody at a networking event, we invite them to a phone conversation. We find out we're a good fit. Let's have a discovery meeting and talk about your project. We'll get to a proposal, right? So the outcome is not always a confirmed piece of business. The outcomes that we're measuring are sometimes the next step, right? A simple inquiry can lead to a demo. We put them into our marketing drip. Eventually an RFP shows up, okay? All of these things will work to grow your business, but if we don't know which ones are working or where these things are coming from, then we don't know where to put more energy in when we're getting the results that we want. So this is about measurements in multiple places. This isn't just about measurements on how many proposals did we write, how many did we close, okay? If a lot of your business comes from referrals, and many of you tell me it is because you're not doing active marketing, your new leads are coming from referrals, somebody else referred them to you, and that's great. What creates referrals? So what can you do to create more referrals then, if that's the way that you want to go? You know, do you need to ask for more referrals? Is that something we measure? How many referrals have we asked for? How many of our past clients and colleagues and suppliers have we contacted to say, hey, would you mind referring us to somebody? Some types of businesses give out spiffs for referrals. Hey, if you'll, send somebody who's a potential buyer, here's your Starbucks card or whatever it might be. Is it more networking? Is it going to networking events with people who can make introductions for you? What triggers meetings? Okay, so referrals one thing, but now do I get a meeting out of it? Are people asking questions and we're saying, hey, we've got solutions, here's expertise I can offer, here's a demo I can give? What's the gate that buyer has to open to get them to the meeting that they need or might possibly want? Okay. What kind of visits do we want to encourage and for what reasons? And then what happens after that? Not all of this turns into immediate business, which is very important to remember in all of this, because some of the best things that you might do will take time to develop. But if you do them, talking about my business development person, what that guy did great was got meetings for people who would become buyers, and specifically people who would buy a lot, but they're not going to come to you with the first project. They're going to come to you for the first meeting. And then they come to you later with a test project. And then they might come to you later with a portfolio of projects. And eventually they come to you saying, we need you to do all of our projects, right? How do you get to that point? Well, you're always thinking about what's down the road, not just the job that's in front of you. So what causes conversion? The impressions that you make along the way, the progress that the buyer is able to make to meet their needs, okay? The validation that you give to them that this process is worth continuing to follow. If you introduce something into the process that doesn't add any value for the buyer, it's not going to be validated and it's not going to bring you closer to conversion. And you might know this when you find that you're not getting conversion every time you take this particular step. So again, another good reason why we want to measure this. So my business development person, if they're bringing me a qualified lead into a capabilities pitch, that's a measurement of their success. A measurement of sales' success is, are we able to convert that into a customer? Make sense? So here's some sample metrics that you guys can think about. And I got a couple pages of these here, so hold on to your hats, right? When you're thinking about measurable conversion, there's lots of conversion points. Conversion is not only they confirmed the order and they're writing us a check, it's we have to get conversion along the way and we have to measure that. Many of you have probably seen your Google Analytics report about your website, which is confusing to say the least. But there's some useful data in there if you understand what it is you're trying to get people to do when they come to your website. So if they come to your website and your goal is to get them to download a lead magnet so you can capture their email and put them into your mailing list, your contact list, and that lead magnet that they've downloaded also has a call to action to invite them to an introductory call or something like that. These are very measurable things. And you may need 100 lead magnet downloads to get one introductory call. Great. Well, if that's the ratio and we can do that fairly consistently, then let's work harder to get people to download those lead magnets. Let's get a bigger and bigger mailing list. I used back when I did more sales training at the beginning of my consulting career, I pointed out to many sales managers and many teams that If they have 5,000 potential buyers in their contact database, and most of you do, through all the people that you've done business with or written quotes for in the past, and you reached out to all of them with a valuable offer for engagement, if only 100 of them replied, only 10 of them showed up, and only one of them bought from you, why would you not do that? Right? Everybody wants one more customer. There's one more customer sitting right there just for the asking. So measuring the success. Measuring website visits to scheduled call. Everybody, if your call to action is to schedule a conversation, how many people visit our website? How many people scheduled a call? I want to track that ratio. Okay. Can I do things to make that ratio improve? Can I change the call to action to the scheduled call? Can I call it something different? Can I put it a different place on the page? Can I describe the person who would want to make that call differently so that the visitor can see themselves making the call? This is what marketing does. There's a science to marketing. I wrote a book about it, right? So there's thought that can be put into these things, and we can measure whether or not that's successful. If your goal is to get a prospect, an ideal prospect, and do a capabilities presentation, and you find that you have great success getting conversion, then I want to measure the number of capabilities presentations we do. And if I need to do 10 capabilities presentations to convert one client, then let's do 50 capabilities presentations and get 5 clients. All right, so measure that. Discovery conversations, you're going to do more of these. You're going to have customers that are going to skip a lot of the processes, and they're going to say, hey, I've got an RFP. And you can say, well, we have a process for onboarding RFPs. Can I bring the team together and we'll do a project discovery and learn more about your project and how we can help you. Now, not all project discoveries are going to turn into a proposal, because it is a screening process. Just like you don't respond to every RFP and you don't want to send a quote on every RFP. But if you could take the RFP and rewrite it, you're much more inclined to do it. Well, a project discovery is an opportunity to rewrite an RFP. It's an opportunity to develop an RFP for a customer who doesn't have an RFP, but they kind of know what they want to have. So I can measure those discovery calls. If I need 50 capabilities presentations to get 5 jobs, I need 100 project discoveries to get 20 jobs. Draft budgets. I talked about this, I think, 2 webinars ago. If you're sending the final proposal without sending a draft budget, compare your close rate. What if you tap the brakes and instead of sending a final proposal, send them a draft budget that says, here's what we're looking at, here's a basic scope of work, here's the product, here's the price range we're looking at, and get some feedback and maybe some discussion about options before you take all that information and you fold that into the final proposal, and then maybe a finite set of options if they're still appropriate at that point. How often when you write a draft budget do you confirm the final proposal versus if you didn't write a draft budget? I'd love to know that metric. If you have a qualified proposal and you get a confirmed order, there's a good metric. If you didn't get it, why didn't you get it? Now I have data I can drill down into. So these are metrics that I can schedule. Project lead time, very big discussion right now. I think we're going to talk about lead times. I think it's next month's webinar, or maybe it's the month after. It's coming up, trust me. I'm writing content for it right now. How do we manage project lead time, and what does it tell us? So if your lead time for qualified opportunities is growing or shrinking, that's important data that might change the behaviors, which might improve your close rate, your retention rate, increase your margins, right? So these are some sample metrics that I would certainly explore. Looking at individual sales persons, what are some metrics in this vein that we might look at differently other than here's the revenue number they generate, here's their close rate? I'm looking for a year-on-year increase or decrease in net sales. Okay. Now, that in and of itself doesn't give you enough information, because there's also a subjective, what's the quality of those sales, or an objective, what's the gross profit of those sales. But that's an important number to track. How are we doing? Retail price to prices sold. Another way of looking at that is, what is the average discount for this salesperson for their book of business. We can also break this down by client if we want to as well. The dollars quoted to dollars closed. Again, this is, I quoted $4 million worth of business. I closed 1.5 million. Change orders. If change orders are important to you, and yes, they should be, I would be measuring change orders. I would be looking maybe even at change orders as a percentage of overall revenue. Great opportunities to be had here. If you're trying to do a better job of recovering project managed fees, boom, measure it. Here's the project management fees recovered, project management fees as a percentage of revenue, project management fees recovered as opposed to what you should have recovered, which might have been a higher number. Lots of good potential data there to tell us how an individual salesperson is working inside of your system to get the results that you want. All of these are forms of conversion. Okay, so we can depending on what your need is or what your pain point is or your opportunity, it's going to affect what you actually choose to measure. Now, we can go a little bit deeper in all of this for those who want to get really geeky. We can drill down into your CRM and say, hey, compare the proposals that you won or lost with or without a discovery call or with or without a capabilities pitch. Right? Compare your conversion rate with or without visiting your office. Especially over time, this is great data to go back and look on to say, hey, over the past 5 years, the people who came in person to our office were 50% more likely to convert. Compare the invites to the office that you're making to the qualified proposals to orders closed. So you can take 3 pieces of data and line them up side by side. If I put out 50 invites to the office and maybe only half of them take it, so I only write 25 fully qualified proposals, but I close 25 orders, that would be an important piece of data that says always invite people to your office, right? As an example of a conversion technique. Again, your conversion technique may be different. You are going to measure something differently. So quick webinar today, but we've got plenty of time for questions. So start getting your questions ready. I've got a couple here up already. I see you guys. Thank you. Smart questions. Quick summary. Look, a sales and marketing funnel, that pipeline that you're dealing with is a series of successes that lead to ideal customers. If they lead to anything else, that's basically a failure in the funnel. It's a failure in the filtering system, which means that you have some conversion points that need to be measured and scrutinized so that you can tweak them so that you have better work coming down into your funnel. Sometimes the tweaks got to be way up at the top of the funnel. Maybe we're getting the wrong people into the funnel, but once they're in there, are we getting the right people down? Okay. If there's something that you do that tends to bring success, do it more often. And I love the idea, and I use it as an example often because I know it works. If you have an office that presents well, get people into it. I don't care what it costs. If you spend $2,500 to fly somebody across the country, pick them at the airport, bring them into your office for a meeting, take them out for a nice dinner, okay? If they give you a $100,000 project, that's a 2.5% investment. If they give you a $100,000 project for the next 5 years, it's a 0.5% investment, okay? If they bring you $1 million a year for the next 5 years, it's a rounding error. So do the things that yield success and make sure that your team knows that they can extend those offers in order to do it. And measure it. You will do more of what you measure. We all know this. So start measuring the things that you think will have an impact. Use that data to improve them. Use that data to reinforce the importance of doing them. Use that data to reward ourselves for knowing that we're doing something that's very, very successful. So I hope that helps you a little bit with some of the things that you can measure about conversion and look at that a little bit differently. Now is a great time as your business has been changing and evolving as we move into our post-pandemic era. We're seeing a lot of changes in our customer activity. we need to make sure that we're analyzing it appropriately so that we can continue the momentum of high margin clients who are loyal, who are coming back to you and giving you basically right of first refusal on every project to work forward. So think about some questions that you have, get those posted in there. Let me talk to a couple other things real quick. Next, oh, there it is, lead times. Next webinar, next month, working with shorter lead times and why this is good for you. I love short lead times. I'm excited for you. I know they make you crazy. There's stuff that we can do about this. Short lead times are good for you. So let's learn how to embrace it. Let's learn how to love them. Um, and operations people, trust me, I'm on your side. We're going to make this work for you. Guys, you know, I've been doing webinars for a really long time. But this webinar will be up on my website for a month, and then it'll get replaced by next month's webinar. If you want to go find older webinars, past webinars on any topic, go over to the Intentional Success Network, intentionalsuccess.biz. They're all there, a complete archive of my webinars, plus blogs and videos and courses and a whole bunch of other stuff there. If you want to go dig through the remnants of my brain from months and years past, it's there. Knock yourself out. It's there for you, free of use. Go take a look at that. If you're interested in finding out more of how we can work together, how I can help you in your business, it all just starts with a conversation, right? Here's your call to action. Let's talk about your goals. Let's talk about what's keeping you from moving faster. Let's talk about how soon you want to get started on making the headway that you want. Go to my website, find the Let's Talks page, book a call. Let's have a conversation. It's no obligation. I love talking to folks. I love learning about your business. Happy to share with you how my other clients and I work together, see if there's a good fit for you. No harm in finding out. You might get some very valuable answers that you can take away and use right now. That's very, very typical. As I mentioned right before the webinar, I've got a new peer group starting. Matter of fact, our first call is this Friday morning, 10:30 Central Time. If any of you want to jump on and join up here at the last minute, reach out to me, shoot me an email if you want to get onto this Friday's call, and I'll tell you how to sign up, what the costs are, what all the benefits are. But you can go check out that web page, Intentional Success Peer Groups, on my website and learn more about it. You don't have to join this month. You can join next month. The group will be going, and I've got 2 groups going, so I'll be happy to filter you into the group that's most appropriate for you. So don't hesitate to reach out about that. It's a very cost-effective way to get out of your bubble, get some information, get coaching time with me at the same time, and I have some other offers for you that might be also helpful. It's a great place to start the conversation. All right, let's do some questions here. I'm going to kill the share here because honestly, you guys don't need to see that anymore. And all right, questions. Don't all go at once. Okay. Tom, and he prefaces by saying he's asked this question before on another webinar, and I remember it. Said, we don't have an office warehouse that you would bring clients to. Is there another way to immerse them into our brand and our team? Well, first of all, how have you immersed people before? You know, if immersion people into your brand and your team is something that's worked for you, how have you done that in the past? Can you reproduce that and continue to do that? But to the more practical question, if you don't have the ideal office warehouse space, let's make that an asset instead of a disadvantage. That means that you get to have encounters in someplace else. So find a place that's your regular encounter place. You know, it could be a partner hotel or resort that you work with. You know, it could be a meeting space on the top of a building. Find another way of doing it. Find some empty warehouse space and create the ideal office on an LED wall and invite people to it. Just be creative, but mostly be yourself. And if, you know, sometimes I say, why don't you just clean up your office? They're going, yeah, we could do that. Well, okay. if all you lack is cleaning, just clean the place up. All right, you got to make that a project. It's something to do over the Christmas, period when you don't have a lot of business going on. It's a good investment, and people don't need to see a big shiny office that looks like a New York ad agency. They need to see you, and they need to see somebody that they can hang with. So you may not convert every client with who you are, um, but you can convert the clients that are probably a good fit for you and be happy with that and be okay with that. We don't all have the fanciest homes. We don't all have the fanciest cars or offices. We don't all, can't buy the most fashionable clothes. Certainly I can't. Um, be genuine, and that's going to have a huge impact on that. So don't let that be the deterrent. Find the conversion point that will work for you. It could be showing up at their office and bringing the team. Think about it. I'm happy to talk about that one offline because I know that's a big question. More questions here. Okay, a question here about quotas. Okay, quotas are a form of measurement. I set quotas for salespeople, but how often should we measure it? Okay. I don't talk about quotas very much because I'm not a big fan of quotas. There is a school of thought in sales that said quotas are important. I find in the service business, it's kind of counterproductive. It's great if I'm selling widgets for my manufacturing friends. But if quotas are something that you do, and particularly in the entry-level sales, customer service reps, account managers, quotas are a great place to start. Remember what the purpose of quotas are. Quotas are there to initiate consequences. Basically, it's the stick. It's the measurement that brings the stick out, or the carrot. So typically we want to avoid the consequence. So regularly checking the quota and making adjustments is really important. So if you're doing quotas, frequent measurement is better. It's better to do a quick update. If you're using a CRM, CRMs are great for measuring against quotas, because quota is more than, do I have a confirmed order? It's how many opportunities am I processing? How many leads am I processing, right? How many prospects do I have on board? I want to measure all of those points. So in measuring quotas, we don't want to measure just the end result. We want to measure the progress along the way. So if I have a salesperson who's doing all of the right things, they're converting leads, they're having discovery calls, they're doing qualified proposals, and just through luck of the draw or whatever, they're not getting the close rate, I don't want to punish them. I just want to update them on that and say, what do I need to do to help this person? And typically what I need to do is give them better leads. I'll say, go watch Glenn Ross movie, go watch the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, read the screenplay, read the stage play, whatever, and learn a little bit about this. Quotas can have a very negative effect on folks. It's the leads that we give people. So think about, what is it telling you? So measure it more often, take corrective action more often. And again, we want to measure things where we can create success if the measurement is not doing what we want it to do. Another question. Says, we invite folks, but they don't come. Okay. Is there a best way, a best practice for getting prospects to visit you? All right. Fantastic question. First of all, it's the invitation that's important. So don't devalue what the invitation did if somebody considered it and they just can't fit it in, or it's not appropriate, or they're not ready. The invitation is pretty huge. Like I said, back when I did sales training, I did a lot of invitation-based business development. Find things to invite people to. That's why I tell you to have an open house. Invite people to your open house. Well, they can't make it, they're not going to fly across the country. Doesn't matter. The invitation was what was important. in a project development process, and if your conversion method for a project is to get the customer into your space to talk about the project, to move the project forward with the team, and you can't get people to come to them, change your approach a little bit. Start treating like this is part of your successful progression. This is how we work with our best customers. Our best customers come to us, we sit down, we get through the project, we drill down into it. This is much more efficient. Our customers get the results they're looking for much more easily and much more cost effectively in this process. So you have to sell the value of the visit to the customer, and that's sometimes lacking. Sometimes the value in the invitation isn't self-evident. So preface the invitation with why you're making this offer, why you're inviting them in, because here's what we get. It's not just a chance for you to see us and for us to show off and do a dog and pony show. This is what's best for your project. So yeah, our best clients use this process. It's not about currying favor. It's about developing the relationship and cultivating the best outcomes. So again, reframe, reframe, reframe. And then try different things. Try different ways of reframing. Try different, reframe the purpose of the meeting. Why are you coming in here? I had one client who spent 6 months inviting customers in to do the discovery meeting about the project and sit down and talk about the project. And they weren't getting a lot of traction on this. And this was during the second half of the pandemic. So not everybody wanted to meet in person. And so I suggested that they change that approach to, instead of doing an in-person meeting, to make it a virtual meeting. And all of a sudden they got much better traction on that. So, reframing that. For the people who didn't want to take the virtual meeting, we tried and tested and had some success with saying, we don't want to talk about your project. We want you to meet the team. Because anything we offer to do with you for your project is going to be contingent on whether or not you want to work with our team. So why don't you come meet our team? And if you don't like our team, then we won't waste our time with each other. Kind of words to that effect. I'm sure it was executed much better than what I just described. So again, this is all about reframing. What else? Okay, all right. Any other questions? This is rare. We may actually wrap up early today, and I'll give you a few more minutes back. There we go. All right, so we had a customer that didn't have the budget previously because they started a new role in that company. We spent a lot of time on their proposal and they went to in-house union venue. This year they are back and trying to budget for next year. What's the question? What's the question? Oh, maybe it's a great comment. So I think I'm going to take away from here based on the process. So the conversion event is not always the terminal event. It's not always going to get you the job. I think what the commenter is saying is that this customer didn't go with them the first year. They took the information, they took the relationship, they took the better understanding. In other words, the conversion event worked, but it allowed that customer to come back the next year and say, hey, here's our budget is based on what you've done in the past. So I'm going to take that as an affirmation that having some sort of a conversion event to move the process forward is good, and is a great way to measure how many people came back to you years later or seasons later and ended up hiring you because you had that conversion event when you did. So I know many of my clientele come to me because they heard me speak at an InfoComm 10 years ago. I chatted with them after the event. That's a conversion event. They may not buy from you tomorrow, they may not buy from you next year, but eventually they will buy for you, and you're building all of that up. So great examples out there, great examples. All right, folks, thank you once again for being here. I hope you all got something valuable out of it. If not, we'll do better on the next one. No, I know you did well. Shoot me any questions you have, reach out anytime. We will see you next month. We will talk about those lead times, and you'll be excited to hear why they're valuable for you. Thanks, everyone. Good to see you. Have a great week.